He was the one of the strongest god in Greek mythology, but his feats were forgotten over time. But now it's time to remember Kratos, the powerful titan who served Zeus with iron loyalty. So let's get started. And while that is quite an impressive feat, it pales in comparison to what the original Kratos was capable of. You see, there was a time when Kratos was nothing more than a slave, chained in the heart of Mount Caucasus, trapped there for eternity. Yet he still managed to become one of the most powerful Olympians, all without having any godly parents. When most people hear the name Kratos, they think of a heavily armed Spartan warrior who cut his way through Greek monsters and even the gods themselves. As you may have already guessed, Kronos planned to use Kratos as a pawn in his war against the Olympians. And while Kratos didn't share his adoptive father's hatred for the Olympians, he was willing to fight alongside him just to prove himself worthy of his teachings. And to prove himself worthy, Kratos would pull off an act of strength that shocked even the elder gods. Unlike his Olympian counterpart, Kratos wasn't born into power. In fact, he was born immortal. As he fled, he was spotted by two eagle-eyed gods, Iris and Leuco. And before long, the once great Titan was no more. Or was he? Well, that depends on how you define the word alive. And before he knew it, they were swooping down from the sky, blocking his path. Now, Iris was known throughout the cosmos for her speed, and Leuco was known for his strength. Together, they were an unstoppable force. But hey, the ancient Greeks weren't known for giving their gods happy endings. And the two gods wasted no time taking out the Titan who had humiliated Zeus. See, when you strip away all the edgy teen angst and over-the-top violence, Kratos the Spartan is really just a tragic figure who was burdened with great power and forced to make impossible decisions. In a lot of ways, he's the embodiment of humanity's struggle to overcome adversity and achieve greatness. Sure, he might be a little quick to anger, and he has a tendency to make things worse instead of better. But at the end of the day, he's just a guy who's trying to do his best. And I think that's something we can all relate to. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But as grateful as Kratos was for the invitation, he couldn't accept it. His duty was to serve Zeus, and no amount of godly friendship would change that. And so Kratos chose to remain on Earth, where he continued to teach mortals the art of strength until his body gave out. But Kronos knew that if he could find a way to weaken Zeus, then the tide of the battle would turn in the Titan's favor. And on the night of the full moon, he set off toward Olympus. If he swore an oath of loyalty to the Olympians and promised to serve them for the rest of his, and according to some accounts, Kratos was the one who taught the hero how to slay the beast. However, there are also accounts of Kratos battling Heracles himself, probably because the hero had unwittingly entered one of the God of Strength's domains. Either way, Kratos' presence definitely helped Heracles claim his prize, and the hero never forgot his mentor's aid. Life, then he would allow Kratos to live. But if he refused, then he would die and be dragged down to Tartarus. Needless to say, Kratos didn't hesitate in accepting the deal. And that's when the God of Strength officially became a servant of Zeus. Though we don't know exactly what tasks Zeus assigned to Kratos, but we do know that he remained loyal to the god until the end of his life. So while they were distracted, he led a surprise attack on their camp, killing many of the gods and mortally wounding Zeus. But despite Kronos' best efforts, the Olympians were able to regroup and push back the Titans. And Zeus, though weakened, was still able to unleash some of his most powerful attacks. One of those attacks was the lightning bolt, which caused such devastation that Kratos and the rest of the Titans had no choice but to flee. Sure enough, no one suspected a thing as he slipped past the guards and made his way to Zeus's tent. There he grabbed the god's thunderbolts and raced away, not stopping until he reached the ocean. One by one, he hurled the thunderbolts into the waves, each one causing a massive explosion of light and sound. To say that this was impressive would be a horrific understatement. We were talking about stealing one of the most powerful weapons in existence and single-handedly disabling one of the most powerful gods at the same time. But Zeus wasn't the only one impressed by Kratos' actions. Even the other Titans cheered him on as he completed his mission, and so he devised a plan. He told Kratos to disguise himself as one of Zeus's heralds and sneak into the goddess camp undetected. Then, under the cover of darkness, he was to steal Zeus's thunderbolts and hurl them into the sea. Of course, this was easier said than done, since Zeus's heralds were armed with swords and shields. it would be incredibly easy for them to spot a naked titan trying to steal their weapons. But Kratos was up for the challenge. His father was Iapetus, one of the 5 titans who each held up one of the sky's 4 corners. And his mother was the titaness Asia. Together, they had 5 sons, including Prometheus and Epimetheus, but none of them were destined for greatness. That is, until the gods waged war against the titans. But before we can get into the incredible deeds that this god performed, we first need to learn about his humble origins. They could either be granted immortality and join the ranks of the Olympians, or they could return to their mortal lives. But the 3 brothers didn't want to abandon their humanity, so they refused the offer. And that meant that their fates were sealed. Prometheus and Epimetheus would go on to live out the remainder of their lives on Earth, while Atlas was condemned to wander the Earth forever. You see, while Atlas would eventually be cursed to hold up the sky for all eternity after the war, the other 3 brothers were given a choice by Zeus. However, there was another titan named Cronus who wanted to give his grandchildren a better chance at life. After all, Cronus had overthrown his own father, Uranus, and led the titans to victory in the war against the elder gods. So, when he heard about the deal that Zeus had struck with his sons, he took matters into his own hands. He freed Kratos from his chains and offered him a place by his side, promising to help him become strong enough to take on Zeus one day. And so Kratos became a loyal servant of Cronus, spending years honing his strength and learning the ways of the titans. And when the time was finally right, Cronus revealed his plan to his adopted son. See, the Gigantomachy was raging across the earth, and both sides were suffering heavy losses. And so he spent several days crafting a suit of armor that looked exactly like one of Zeus's heralds. And Cronus was overjoyed. He knew that the Olympians would never expect an attack from someone as insignificant as Kratos. And that's when Kratos' luck ran out. To make matters worse, Kratos' adoptive brother, Prometheus, begged the gods to spare his brother's life, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. See, when Iris and Leuco brought Kratos' corpse back to Olympus, Zeus had a proposition for the dying titan. After all, when the hero Heracles was searching for the golden apples of Eris, he came across a garden guarded by a fearsome dragon. In fact, when Heracles ascended to godhood, he invited Kratos to join him on Olympus. Now, when you think about it, that is actually a pretty tragic ending for a character who was originally supposed to be a god of war. But now it's time to hear from you. Which version of Kratos is your favorite? And why did Zeus spare his life in the first place? And as for me, I think I prefer the original Kratos simply because he reminds me of a certain someone. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. As always, I wish you all a wonderful day.